Hello, welcome to UpFront. I'm Redi Tlhabi. Has Israel and the United States' war with Iran increased or decreased the global nuclear threat? That conversation's coming up. But first, former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has been calling for regime change in Iran for decades. This week on UpFront, I'll challenge him on why he backs a long war in the Middle East and what the consequences would be for the U.S., the region, and the wider world. Ambassador Bolton, welcome to UpFront. Now, in the past week, we've seen leaders from around the world calling for de-escalation, restraint, and a diplomatic solution to the war between U.S., Israel, and Iran. In a recent interview, you said that a diplomatic solution would be a mistake. Why?
Well, we've seen for 25 years the government of Iran attempt to continue to pursue its objective of getting deliverable nuclear weapons while promising all kinds of steps to do exactly the opposite. We've also seen it consistently refuse to talk about its support for international terrorism, its own state terrorism, and its ballistic missile programs. So when you have this extent of experience, and could see even in recent days that the government was doing everything it could to simply buy time to avoid what has now happened, that there's no question here of negotiating in good faith with this government. The government itself is the problem. It threatens innocent people in the region and around the world. It threatens its own people. And I think the course that's been launched upon is a legitimate exercise of the inherent right of individual and collective self-defense. And I think we'll see how long it takes, but that is the course we're on, and I think that's the course that we'll stay on.
You have argued for military action against Iran for decades now, yet the U.S. administration briefed Congress that it had no intelligence that Iran planned to strike the U.S. first. I may add that the UN watchdog says it sees no structured nuclear weapons program. So if it is not an imminent threat, why is the United States bombing Iran?
Because we're not required to wait until it's an imminent threat. There may be a lot that's going on that we don't know about, and even more that's going on that the IAEA doesn't know about. We also know that for 3 decades or more, there's been cooperation between Iran and North Korea, both on nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. And so it's entirely possible that Iran could get nuclear weapons simply by purchasing warheads from North Korea. Iran is the proximate threat to peace and security in the Middle East, and until that regime is overthrown and the people of Iran have a chance to govern the country, there's no chance for lasting peace and security in the region.
So you're arguing that it does not need to be an imminent threat, but it is not irrelevant that the President of the United States is saying this week that Iran was 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. What I'm trying to get at is that the basis of going into Iran is that it posed an imminent threat. You have the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying that, well, we struck Iran because we had information that Israel was going to strike first. There is no coherent story. Are we back there again where the basis of going to war with another country is a lie?
Well, the administration may be confused, but I'm not confused. I think the threat is very real, and it doesn't matter whether it's a threat that of some remove or closer. But I would say again, Iran's real distance from nuclear weapons is about 72 hours. If it sends a bank transfer to Pyongyang, the central bank of North Korea, and gets a nuclear warhead in return.
So are you saying that the president is lying? Do you concede that the president was lying to the American people?
No, look, I'm not a defender of Donald Trump, as you may know. I think he's trying different pieces of logic. He said as well that there obviously is a threat. But he's worried about dissent from within his own political base. I think the strategic arguments on behalf of the United States are real. I think it's a mistake that Trump has not made those arguments more effectively in the United States with Congress and internationally. But the case itself is very, very real.
So why strike a country that was at the negotiating table? You insist that Iran posed an imminent threat, but we do know that negotiations have been going on. Donald Trump said in February, we likewise had very good talks on Iran. Iran looks like it wants to make a deal very badly. And we have Oman also saying we're just moments away from a peace deal. Are these negotiations then that the United States keep having performative?
There are performances on the part of the government of Iran. I said earlier, and I'll just say it again, there's no need to say there's an imminent threat from Iran. There's certainly no imminent nuclear threat. One could argue there's an imminent terrorist threat from Iran in the United States, in Europe, in the region through what's left of their terrorist proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. I think the record of negotiation over the past 25 years has been that it's Iran that has strung these out, that has made commitments it hasn't honored, and that it's their record of deception that provides a more than adequate basis to conclude that they continue to want to have deliverable nuclear weapons. In fact, I would say there is literally no evidence whatever that Iran has ever made a strategic decision to stop its efforts to get nuclear weapons.
Iran was at the negotiation table and the leaders get killed during that time. It sounds like it is the United States that is approaching this crisis in bad faith.
No, I don't think so at all. I think when you're dealing with people who are in effect committing fraud, acting as if they're serious about negotiations, but who are not, that doesn't pose any obstacle. We're not required to be at the mercy of the theological fanatic regime that runs that country.
But you are required to act within the confines of international law, are you not? If there is an argument that the UN is putting on the table that it sees no evidence of a nuclear program, why does the US insist that there is?
I don't think that's what the IAEA is saying, and in any event, it doesn't bind the United States. It may occur to you that we have other sources of information.
So the United States can just set the tone and set the agenda in a multilateral world, taking a region to a war. Should you not be consulting even with your allies who are today calling for restraint and are not supporting this decision?
Well, I think we should have done more to consult with the allies. I'm not defending the Trump administration's approach to this. But I think the response from Iran is really quite revealing of what kind of government they've got, notwithstanding that the 6 member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council themselves launched no hostile action against Iran. It is Iran that has fired missiles and drones at civilian targets. I think that tells you everything you need to know about that regime.
Okay, we can concede that Iran's approach as well has been problematic in some instances, but let's just go to the war itself. On the first day of the war, we saw that more than 165 schoolgirls and staff were killed by the airstrike. We've seen mounting civilian casualties. We've also seen the global economy on a downward spiral. And as you said, the conflict is escalating to the region. Is there a certain threshold of death and destruction at which you would say this is enough and needs to stop immediately?
Well, let's be clear. I don't think the United States can be accused of targeting a girls' school deliberately. We don't know what the circumstances are there. It could well be that it was an Iranian missile that hit that school. We do know the girls' school is right next to an IRGC naval base, not the best place for a girls' school to be. I think that the casualties that have been suffered in Iran so far are almost exclusively government personnel, many of them military, but many of them civilian leaders, including the supreme leader who, after all, represented national command authority. If the regime itself weren't so bloodthirsty, it wouldn't be in this problem. There is credible evidence that in January, the government, to put down the protest demonstrations against its authoritarian rule, machine gunned innocent civilians in the streets of cities and towns across Iran, and by many accounts, killed more than 30,000 people. That, again, is compelling evidence of the nature of that regime.
Respectfully, Ambassador, the claim that this was an Iranian missile that hit the school has been debunked numerous times.
I think it's being investigated. I think nobody should speak with certainty what caused it. It's a tragedy that innocent civilians like that were killed. But as I say, putting a girls' school near a naval base headed by the Revolutionary Guard was not good planning, at least. Whether it was put there to be camouflage is another question that's worth investigating.
Well, one would think that if the United States and Israel are going to hit a school, that they would make certain that the intelligence is credible. Iranians don't want to be burying their children.
I don't think there's any evidence at this point that the school was targeted by Israel or the United States. It's a tragedy that it happened. There's no doubt about that.
Well, the reality is that 165 elementary school children are dead, and it's not something that we can be flippant about.
And several thousand Israeli civilians were killed by Hamas, which is an agent of the Iranian government.
We are now in the realm of whataboutism. We are dealing with a school that was targeted this week, and that's what I'd like us to speak about.
And I'll say it one more time. You can keep repeating your question. I don't think the U.S. or Israel targeted that school. If it was hit by an American missile that misfired or was mistakenly targeted, I think the United States will apologize and provide recompense. That's what we do.
Let's move on to something else, a broader strategic objective about this war. In a recent interview, you said that in this war, the strategic thinker is Bibi Netanyahu beyond doubt. Let me ask you this directly. Who is setting the strategy here? Is it Washington or Netanyahu? Is Israel effectively leading U.S. foreign policy?
No, I think this is a joint mission. I think the two countries agreed to it. I've known Netanyahu for many years, and I know he has recognized the threat that everybody in the region, including all the Gulf Arab states, face from Iran.
Can I just ask you about what you said about Donald Trump? You have not hidden the fact that you think he's not competent to lead this nation. In fact, in your book, you say that he has no political philosophy. Searching for policy coherence is fruitless since he cares almost exclusively about his own interest. That is a scathing indictment on the President of the United States. How do you reconcile supporting such a historic decision like going to war and leave such a weighty matter under a commander-in-chief that you have described as incompetent?
Because I think it's the right decision, and I think you have to make your judgments based on what you think the right policy is on behalf of the United States. And I thought we should have removed this regime in Tehran for at least 20 years.
You say that making decisions on behalf of the United States, but the polls are starting to come in. The recent poll, most U.S. citizens are not in favor of U.S. strikes on Iran. You are advocating for regime change, I take it, a strategy that could mean a long, drawn-out conflict costing billions of dollars. If Americans don't want this war, why are you doing it?
Because I don't base my opinions on public opinion surveys. I base them on what I think is in the best interest of the United States. I think Trump made a mistake in not preparing the public for the conflict in advance. He may yet be able to make it up. And I think ultimately, if we are successful in overthrowing the regime, that it will demonstrate to people who will then support it why it was in our best interest to do so.
But can you really bomb a political future into existence here? We have experiences in Libya.
I don't think that's what we're trying to do. I think the objective here is to destroy the instruments of Iranian state power that threaten the United States, threaten the Gulf Arab states, threaten Israel, threaten much of the world, and threaten its own people. And by destroying those assets, demonstrate to other figures in the regime, including in the regular army, not the Revolutionary Guard necessarily, but in the regular army, that the days of the regime are numbered, and that they would have to make a decision whether they're going to go down with the ship or whether they will transfer their allegiance to the people of Iran, who overwhelmingly reject the rule of the Ayatollahs.
It didn't work so well in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, regime change has a deeply troubling record. Let me finish. When imposed from the outside, I mean,
the Taliban
the Taliban is back in power.
Removed in Iraq.
Taliban is back in power. With Iraq, there was a vacuum,
that's because
and
the United
ISIS,
States left under the Biden administration. That was the mistake.
But it proves the point that the United States destabilized the region, and you didn't achieve the goals that you promised the people. Iraq and ISIS.
Here's the goal I want to achieve. I want to eliminate Iran's nuclear weapons program. I want to eliminate its ballistic missile program, and I want its ability to carry out terrorist operations and support terrorist groups eliminated. And I think we're well on the way to doing that.
Ambassador Bolton, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was great.
As the United States and Israel's war with Iran continues, President Donald Trump reiterated this week that Iran was close to obtaining a nuclear weapon. But did Tehran ever truly pose a nuclear threat? And could this war spark a new wave of global nuclear proliferation? Joining me to discuss this is Joe Cirincione. He's a national security analyst, former advisor to the U.S. State Department, and author of the book Nuclear Nightmares: Securing the World Before It Is Too Late. Joe, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. President Trump said recently if the U.S. had not attacked Iran, then, quote, within 2 weeks, Iran would have had a nuclear weapon, and, quote again, you would have had a nuclear war and Iran would have taken out many countries. Just lay out the facts here.
Yeah,
Were Iran's nuclear capabilities posing an imminent threat to the U.S. and the world at large?
No. It's simply not true that Iran was close to a nuclear weapon. They have been developing nuclear capabilities for some time, but as far as we know, they abandoned any effort to get a nuclear weapon back in 2003. In fact, the U.S. intelligence services repeatedly, every year, say that Iran does not have an ongoing nuclear weapons program. The president is simply confused. I don't think he understands the difference between nuclear material, which Iran has, and a nuclear weapon, which it doesn't have. It's very simple. Iran has the capability to take some of the enriched uranium that they've already produced in gas form and to take some of that, particularly their stockpile of 60% enriched uranium, and feed it into the centrifuges they already have. But that's just the material. Making the material is the hardest part of a nuclear weapon, but it's just the beginning. You then have to take that gas and turn it into powder and then turn it into a metal. That's going to take you several weeks. And then if you want to take that weapon and turn it into a deliverable weapon that you could put on the nose cone of a missile, that's going to take you months and tests of that warhead design, something that we would see Iran doing.
So it's quite a process. They wouldn't have been able to do it in secret.
Absolutely not. They could probably enrich the uranium in secret. We probably wouldn't see them doing that. But every step after that, it would be observable, particularly because we now know that Israel has penetrated the Iranian nuclear program very deeply, clearly has some human sources in that program. So no, they couldn't hide this effort.
So just one day before this war started, Oman's foreign minister, who was mediating these nuclear negotiations, said that a deal was within reach. And Iran's foreign minister said exactly that we have no interest in developing a nuclear weapon. So why strike now? And what are the implications for the future of nuclear negotiations?
Right. Again, the president of the United States is confused. He said in his State of the Union address, Iran has refused to say the magic words, no nuclear weapon. That's simply not true. They've said it repeatedly. There's even a fatwa denouncing nuclear weapons as immoral, something that many religious leaders have said. So what the president seems to have, and they have taken the excuse that Iran was not agreeing to take steps in the negotiations. Again, untrue. We know that because the Oman foreign minister, the mediator in the talk, flew to Washington last Friday specifically to brief the vice president of the United States because he wanted to make sure that this administration and congressional leaders understood that there was a very good offer on the table. Briefly, Iran was proposing that they stop all enrichment of uranium, all of it, something they hadn't agreed to before, for a period of time, 3 to 5 years. And then they would agree that even when they resumed it, they wouldn't stockpile any gas. So you'd eliminate that breakout opportunity that we just discussed. That's a pretty good deal. That is not at all what Witkoff said the Iranians had offered. And this is why the Oman foreign minister, felt that he needed to go. He didn't trust Witkoff and Kushner to convey the actual proposal, and it seems that he had good reason not to trust them.
And in his final public address, the supreme leader, who has now been killed, Ayatollah Khamenei, said, "We must have deterrent weapons. If a country does not have deterrent weapons, it will be crushed under the feet of its enemies." So here's the question. Could this attack on Iran and the killing of its supreme leader end up bolstering Iran's ambitions for a nuclear deterrent?
Yes, absolutely. I think this attack has probably accelerated Iran's program. I read Ali Khamenei's remarks there to mean missile programs, because the other thing the United States was demanding was an end to the missile programs. Well, Iran doesn't have an air force. The missiles are its air force. It was using them to deter other countries, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the U.S. from attacking it with these missiles. Obviously, that deterrent failed, but we're never going to give that up. But now, if you're Iran, and after the U.S. and Israel stop their attacks and you're still standing, what conclusion are you going to draw from this? That you need a bigger deterrent, that you need a nuclear weapon. And it won't just be Iran who's thinking that.
France has already vowed that it would increase its nuclear warheads, and there are several European countries that have signaled that they support a wider French-led nuclear deterrence strategy. Are we then likely, or are we witnessing the start of a new era of nuclear proliferation?
We absolutely are. And it's mainly because of the United States. It's not something that's happening to us. We're causing this. Why is France making those statements? Why are countries like Germany and Japan and Poland and Finland starting to talk about their nuclear options? Because the President of the United States has signaled and actually told them that he might not be committed to their security. So they no longer trust the United States to back up their security. And if you're the UAE, if you're Saudi Arabia, you got to be thinking the same thing now. So it's not just Iran after this war that's going to be thinking about getting a nuclear weapon. It might be some of the Arab states as well. And so now this war is fueling a trend that was already ongoing. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
You have called this actually the most dangerous period of nuclear age. Why?
Because of the policies of the United States. We are dismantling all the arms control agreements. With Vladimir Putin of Russia, the United States, under Trump, has been pulling out of the arms control agreements, most importantly, the New START agreement, the last remaining strategic arms control agreement between the United States and Russia. It's tearing down the nuclear guardrails, not replacing them with anything, and instead, both the United States and Russia are building up their arsenals. Others see that, like China, they follow, and now you have countries thinking they need to get their own nuclear weapons because they can no longer rely on the United States. We're back to the nuclear mania of the 1950s and 60s. It's probably the most dangerous time we've had since the height of the Cold War.
I'm really fascinated by something that you've said. You've recently stated that, quote, "It's far more likely that this war will accelerate regime change in America than it will accelerate regime change in Iran." What did you mean by that?
Yeah. The goal of regime change in Iran is one that's long been sought by many hardliners in the United States and in Israel, but it's impossible to do that with an air campaign alone. No war in history has ever toppled a government just with air power. It takes an invasion. And the Iranian regime is not like that of Saddam Hussein in Iraq or Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. It's not a one-man rule. It's a deep, decades-long revolutionary mechanism that's been put in place and has been preparing for this moment for all those decades. That's why one of my great concerns is what Israel's planning to do now. It looks like they're starting to shift to a sustained bombing campaign to ruin Iran's infrastructure. That's why they want this to go on for weeks and months. They want to do a Gaza-like effort on the main power centers in Iran to kill thousands of people, not just the core. Knowing that, I think it's highly unlikely the American government, even under Trump, is going to back that. He's going to quit before we get to anything like that, and it's going to make him look weaker and weaker. So I think this has compounded the already large concerns that the American public has about the President of the United States. The war is unpopular. The President is unpopular. It's more likely to accelerate regime change in America than it is in Iran.
Joe Cirincione, thank you for joining me on UpFront.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. UpFront will be back next week. Goodbye.